Hail Traveler, and welcome back to the Strataugury basic gameplay tutorial. It is I, the Fatebringer, and I'm here to continue teaching you how to play Strataugury, an epic fantasy dueling card game that utilizes just a deck of standard playing cards. In this video, we will be covering spellcasting and ability exercising in basic gameplay. If you missed our first video on combat with units, you may wish to venture to that video first, as it also gives an overview of the basic gameplay components. Let us resume our journey. A spell is an action performed by a player or the spellcaster that may target soldiers, other players, or the spellcaster themselves, applying unique effects. Spells require that a specific combination of cards from the spellcaster's hand, which determines the spell, be placed on or in front of the target, and may additionally require that a certain amount of mana be turned or burned. Spells must be cast one at a time during the player's turn, but there is no limit to the number of spells a player can cast, assuming that they have the cards and mana to do so. When performed, the spellcaster must announce what spell they are casting, the target of the spell, pay the mana cost, if any, and reveal the cards they are using to cast. There is an entire library of spells in Strataugury, and they have different types to distinguish how to handle their effects. Firstly, a spell can either be instantaneous or an enchantment. Instantaneous spells have effects which are immediately applied, and then the spell cards are placed in the dump. For example, Two Kings is a Decade Augment spell. To cast it, we'll place the kings down in front of us, the target. If our opponent says they allow it, then our health is immediately increased by 10, which can exceed our initial value of 30. Once the spell effects have been applied, we place the spell cards into the dump. The other kind of spell, enchantments, act a bit differently because their spell itself remains active after casting, its effects being applied until expired or dispelled. Enchantments can either be dispelled when they are initially cast or later in the game on the dispeller's turn. Some enchantments have a set duration, which, once those rounds have passed, it expires, the effects stop being applied, and it is placed in the dump. Next, a spell can either be runic or sacrificial. Runic spells are cast with at least one runic or numeric card and require some mana cost when casting, either turning or burning. Sacrificial spells are cast with only royal cards or jokers and have no mana cost when casting. To summarize, every spell is considered either instantaneous or an enchantment, and every spell is either runic or sacrificial. Lastly, some spells are additionally considered life-modifying or mind-altering. All you need to worry about with these types of spells is that they do not affect the undead, which are limited to skeletons and zombies in basic gameplay. Successfully dispelling a spell prevents it from affecting the target in any way and instead immediately sends it to the spellcaster's dump. In other words, it is cancelling the spell. When a spell is initially cast, each player must either declare that they allow the spell or must attempt to dispel it. A player can immediately attempt to dispel the spell by placing a combination of cards from their hand on top of the spell that is of a dispel value equal or greater than the cards used to cast the spell. If there is no counter dispel to the dispel, the spell is cancelled, its effects are nullified, and it is immediately sent to the spellcaster's dump. However, if desired, the dispel can be countered by a counter dispel by the original spellcaster or any other player. This is done by placing a combination of cards from their hand on top of the dispel of a value equal or greater than the dispel cards. If there is no counter dispel to this counter dispel, the spell is successfully cast, and its effects are applied. This sequence of spell, followed by dispel, followed by counter dispel, can be executed indefinitely until a counter dispel is not countered. After the outcome is decided, all dispel and counter dispel cards are sent to the respective players' dumps. Note that the players cannot perform any other actions, like derivation, casting a different spell, attacking, and so on, until all players declare that they allow the spell, or until the outcome of the attempted dispel is decided. As a reminder, if an enchantment is cast but not immediately dispelled, another player can still attempt to dispel it later in the game during their turn, but only once per turn. Successfully dispelling the enchantment immediately cancels its effects, but, depending on the spell, might not reverse the consequences from the enchantment while it was active. So, how do we determine the dispel value of a spell? That is determined by the cards used to cast the spell, which can be referenced in the Strataugury manual's dispel table. If we cast Chain Reaction with a pair of 4s, you can see on the table that its base dispel value would be 2. The dispel value of a combination of individual dispels is additive, such that if a player uses a 3 of a kind with a base value of 7, a matching pair and a 2-card same color straight, each with a base value of 2, it would have a base dispel value of 7 plus 2 plus 2, equaling 11. In the event of a base dispel value tie, we must compare the fractional dispel values. The fractional dispel value of a card combination is equal to the numeric value of its highest valued card. Runic cards' numeric value is tied to their face value. For example, a 6 of spades has a numeric value of 6. Royal cards and jokers are assigned numeric values as if continuing from 10. So a jack is worth 11, a queen is worth 12, a king is worth 13, an ace is worth 14, and jokers have the same numeric value as the card they are replacing. So, our 3 6s would have a fractional dispel value of 6, our pair of jacks would have a fractional dispel value of 11, and our pair of 2s would have a fractional dispel value of 2. These fractional dispel values are also additive, so the complete dispel value of this dispel would be 11.19. Dispelling is likely the most complicated part of Strataugury, so let us walk through another example. Let us presume that we have a character with an active fear enchantment placed upon them. 2 2s, a dispel value of 2.02. We attempt to dispel it with 3 queens, base value of 7, fractional value of 12, and a 2-card same color straight, a base value of 2, a fractional value of 5, as the highest valued card in this combination is the 5, for a total dispel value of 7 plus 2, 0.12 plus 5, equaling 9.17. If the opponent counters with 3 10s, a base value of 7, a fractional value of 10, and 2 8s, a base value of 2, a fractional value of 8, they have a higher dispel value, with 7 plus 2, 0.10 plus 8, equaling 9.18, and they successfully counter the dispel. We choose not to counter the opponent's counter dispel, and the queens, 5s, 10s, and 8s are placed in the respective player's dumps. The fear enchantment therefore remains active. We may not attempt to dispel that specific spell again until our next turn. If, in a future round, we wish to dispel the fear enchantment, we can start by dispelling with a value of 2.02 or higher. In other words, all previous dispels have since dissipated, and the dispel value has been reset. As mentioned in our previous video, creatures are minions acquired by chance that possess distinct abilities which cannot be dispelled. Some abilities are exercised automatically due to a condition being met, and some are exercised through the ability exercising action. For example, goblins have an automatically exercised ability called Initiative, which allows them to perform a standard attack in the same turn they are summoned, without taking any damage from the blocking unit. By contrast, a zombie, after the turn it is initially summoned, may exercise Flesh Appetite during the owner's turn, which causes the targeted dead character from any player's graveyard to be sent to the dump and restores the zombie's current AD back to its maximum of 6. Because creatures are not considered characters, they cannot be targeted by spells that solely target characters, like healing, nor are they affected by spells that exclusively affect a player's characters, like Fortitude. They can, however, be targeted by spells that target soldiers, like Fear, and are affected by spells that affect a player's soldiers, like Invulnerability. Another delightful aspect of creatures is that 2 of the same type can breed to create a new creature of that type at a cost of 1 mana burned. For example, 2 trolls can breed to create another troll. The resulting creature is summoned and placed on the battlefield using a representative token. A representative token is a face-down card placed on the battlefield, most commonly taken from the dump, but can also be the top card from the draw deck or any card from the player's hand. The color of the summoned creature is based on its parents, so 2 red creatures will breed to produce an additional red creature. If the parents are different colors, the color of the newly summoned creature is decided by the player immediately upon its summoning. Creatures cannot breed until after the turn they are initially summoned, cannot breed and perform standard attacks in the same turn, and can only breed once per turn. Within the bestiary, there is a subclass of creatures known as the undead, which includes skeletons and zombies in basic gameplay. Because of their preternatural state, they cannot be targeted by mind-altering spells such as fear or possession. Additionally, they cannot be targeted by life-modifying spells such as murder or resurrection. They are also unaffected by mind-altering or life-modifying spells targeting their owner, such as hysteria or black death. Lastly, undead creatures cannot breed. To give you a better sense of how spells and abilities are applied in a combat situation, we will analyze a game that is already in progress. On our battlefield, we have a footman of diamonds with a current AD of 9, a stone wall with a current defense of 30, a knight of clubs with a current AD of 19, and a griffin with a current AD of 10. The opponent has a banded palisade with a current defense of 30 and 9 attack, an amazon with a current AD of 8, and a paladin with a current AD of 25. It is our turn, so we'll draw a 9, which gives us 2 9s in our hand. We are going to cast a spell called Bow and Arrow, targeting our knight at a cost of 3 mana turned. We place the 2 9s, the spell cards, on our knight and turn 3 mana. Now we must wait for the opponent to either attempt to dispel this spell or allow it. The opponent decides to attempt to dispel the Bow and Arrow spell, a dispel value of 2.09, by placing a 3-card straight on the spell, a dispel value of 3.08. Now, we have the chance to counter this dispel by placing a card combination equal to or greater than this dispel value. So, we are also going to place a 3-card straight, using a Jack, Queen, King on top of that, a dispel value of 3.13. Luckily, they choose not to counter our dispel, so our spell is successfully cast. All dispel cards are then placed in each player's respective dump. With the Bow and Arrow enchantment cast upon him, our knight can perform a standard attack without taking any damage from his blocker, so we perform a standard attack toward the opponent with just our knight. The opponent blocks using their palisade, which takes 19 points of damage, but inflicts no damage on our knight. Additionally, we will have our griffin exercise worthy mount with our footman as the targeted rider. The combined unit of the footman mounted on the griffin is considered a creature with 19 AD, which is the sum of their current AD values. We end our turn. The opponent is going to perform a standard attack toward us by declaring all of their attackers. They declare that their amazon and paladin are attacking. We choose our wall to block the paladin, which lowers its current defense to 5. We block the amazon with our mounted griffin, which drops her to a current AD of 0, and the mounted griffin to a current AD of 11. The amazon is killed and sent to the graveyard. The opponent ends their turn. Now it is our turn. We shall perform a standard attack with both our knight and mounted griffin. The opponent selects the paladin to block our knight, which inflicts 19 damage on the paladin, but does no harm to the knight due to the Bow and Arrow enchantment. The paladin now has a current AD of 6. The opponent cannot use the palisade to block our mounted griffin, since griffins, mounted or unmounted, cannot be blocked by structures, so the opponent must take the hit on their health, which is reduced by 11 down to 19. We have a pair of 8s in our hand, which we use to repair our wall 16 points of defense, the sum of the runic cards, which raises it to a current defense of 21. We end our turn. The opponent draws a card, then casts Murder, targeting the mounted griffin by turning a single mana and placing 2 6s on top of the target. If Murder had been cast on our footman before he mounted the griffin, it would have been at a cost of 2 mana turned. However, the combined unit is considered a creature, which requires that only 1 mana be turned. Since we do not have sufficiently potent dispel cards available, the griffin and the footman are both placed in the dump. At last, we have covered almost all elements of basic gameplay, so we will dive into some optional rules that may enhance your experience. All players in the game must agree if these rules will be used. An artifact is one non-joker card you can choose at the beginning of the game and place it off to the side, face down. At any point during the game, you can turn 5 mana to add this artifact to your hand on your turn. Secondly, a breaker is a way to dispel a spell you have an extreme distaste for. Once per game, you may perform a breaker by taking 10 cards off the top of your draw deck and placing them directly into your dump. Then, you may dispel a spell at a dispel value of 1000. A breaker cannot be performed if you have fewer than 10 cards in your draw deck. Additionally, a breaker cannot be used as a counter dispel. Congratulations, you have completed the tutorial for basic gameplay. You may feel burdened with this wealth of knowledge, but as long as you have the manual at your side, you should have no trouble navigating Strataugury. We suggest taking a quick skim of the rules before starting a game, because there are a few bits and pieces we may have glossed over. In our next video, we will cover advanced gameplay, which introduces supernaturals, monuments, heroes, new creatures, and amulets, a myriad of fantastical things to add to the battlefield. We hope to see you there, and thank you for watching. May the Alos guide you.